But in the book of Judges, so again, we've looked at Amnon. We looked at Amnon first, and we talked about how Amnon had a friend. We looked at David, and how that David had a place he should have been and a place he should not have been. And then we've got the Samson here, and Samson is a very interesting character. It's funny because there are certain, and I'm going to call them characters. Y'all understand what I'm saying? There are certain people in the Bible that you can just mention and people just know. And when you think about Samson, people think about Samson, they think about him as a strong man. And it's interesting. It's one of those things, and again, I may have mentioned it before. It's one of those things when there's Brother Cody, I got a whole list of things when I get to heaven I want to see. I want to see. What did Samson look like? Did Samson look like Arnold Schwarzenegger in his heyday, or did he just look like me and you? You know what I mean? Because they like, she asked him, the Philistines are like, hey, we want to know where your great strength lies. And so it almost appears to me that Samson didn't look like a strong man. It almost appears to me, if you look up like pictures or even cartoons, they always had him as a big old strong man. But I don't know that he looked that way. Because it was when the Spirit of the Lord come upon him. That was when he was strong, and so I'm not sure that he looked that way. But yet here is Samson, and again, like I said, I mean, you think about Samson, you think about him as a strong man, but you also think about Delilah. You can't think about Samson without also thinking about the story of Delilah. And one of the very last verse in the chapter that we're looking at here says that Samson judged Israel for 20 years. Now we just read it. We read it in about 3.5 chapters is what we read of Samson, and we read those chapters. And again, like I said, we don't realize that we're spanning a 20 year, we're spanning a 20 years, actually more than that, because I mean you're talking about when his parents were informed that they were going to have a child, but you're expanding more than that, but you're spanning 20 years of his life. And yet there's just a couple stories in that 20 years, but the story most people remember the most is the story of Samson and Delilah. And again, it's a shame, and I think about how, again, Riley, I mean, you can do a lot of good for a long time, and you can make a big mistake at the end, and that's what you're remembered for. That's what you're remembered for. There was a long time, guys, when I struggled. If I saw a preacher fall, I struggled hard with it. And I finally had to come to the conclusion that they're just men like we are. They're just a man like I am and you are. And a lot of times we put them up on a pedestal. We put them up almost like they're a god, and that's not who they are. They're just a man. And the other understanding is that the devil is out to get every one of them. And I think I mentioned that before, how that Jesus told Peter that Satan had desired to sift him as wheat. And every man, not just a preacher, but a Sunday school teacher, a deacon, just a church member, the devil is out to steal your heart from God. And he doesn't care how he does it. That's the thing about it. He doesn't care. And so just like the Philistines found Samson's weakness before they found out where his strength was, they found out his weakness was with a woman. And so 3 different times they attempted, the first time was with his wife, and we talked about that. The second time was when he went into the harlot, and we didn't look at that much, but then he got up in the middle of the night and left. But this time now, so here Samson goes, and he goes to Delilah, and now he's found this woman, and they go, and the Lord to the Philistines said, "We'll give you 1,100 pieces of silver." And she said, "I'll take it. I'll take that money." And from that moment on, she has one goal in mind. That's to keep Samson infatuated with her, to keep Samson coming back to her until she finds out what his strength is, so that she can earn that money. And so we looked at last week how that Samson started playing a game. He started playing a game. It was just a game to him. He was just playing, and so he was just playing a game. And so she's like, "Tell me where your strength lies." And he said, "If you use 7 green whips." And so she binds him. She binds him and says, "The Philistines are upon thee," and he jumps up and just breaks him off. He just breaks him off, and then she comes right back. And again, that's where we looked at last week how that there were men lying in wait, and he actually says, "If they bind me," almost like he knew these guys were there, like he knew. But it was a game to him, Brother Wayne. It was a game. It was just he was in charge. And sin is that way. It'll entice you, and then it'll let you play, and you think you're in charge until you're hooked. And then I remember someone. This is when I lived in Maryland. My brother-in-law went to Atlantic City, and Brother Parks. Maybe it's not set up this way. Maybe it is, but he won some money. They got back a whole lot more than whatever they gave out to him. Because then he went back, Cody, and then he went back, and then went back again. And then they started treating him like it was a VIP. Well, he was a VIP because he won money, and they wanted their money back. And so they got their money back and a whole lot more. And sin's that way. It'll let you think you're in charge for a little while, until it finally gets its hold on you, and then you're like, "Hey, I don't want to play anymore," and it's like, "Nope, you're playing. You're playing." And so here's Samson, and God, I believe that God gave him warning after warning, and he ignored it. I don't believe that God gave him no brains. I don't believe that God gave him, zero ability to discern. Hey, she's asking you the question because she wants to know, and she wants to take your strength from you. And yet Samson played the game. And so you get down here to verse number 10. It says, "And Delilah said unto Samson, Behold, thou hast mocked me." She's like, "You're just playing a game with me." And he was. And again, like I said, a lot of times we don't realize that we think we're in charge, and the whole time we're going to be the loser, not the winner in this game. I got this. You ever seen someone, if you read books or anything, that's a sharp, whether it's playing cards or whether it's playing pool, or just any kind of game. They'll let you win a little bit. They'll let you win the first game or two until the stakes start coming up. And once the stakes start coming up, that's when they're like, "All right, I got it now." And they take your money. And so here's Samson, and he's like, "Hey, we're playing this game. We're having a good time. This is a lot of fun. This is fun. Like, I'm enjoying this." And I'll be honest with you, when I think about Delilah, I think like she had to be so cold. She had to be so cold. I looked up not too long ago, but if you look up on the FBI most wanted list, if you look that up and you look up counterintelligence, you know who a lot of those people in the counterintelligence most wanted are? They're women. And they're from two places. They're from Russia and China. That should tell you who the enemies of the United States are. That should tell you, give you a pretty good idea, but they're from Russia and they're from China. And sometimes, and if y'all are not judgmental, forgive me for being that way, but sometimes you just look at the picture and you're like, "Oh, that one's cold right there." Like she's cold. And so I think about Delilah, and I think about how that she was solely focused on finding this out. And Samson's over there, and he's just playing the game. He's just playing the game. But the problem is he starts getting a little closer and a little closer. It says in verse number 13, it says, Delilah said unto Samson, hitherto thou hast mocked me and told me lies. Tell me wherewith thou mightest be bound. And he said unto her, if thou weavest the 7 locks of my head with a web. So now we're getting a little closer. At first it was just, bind me with green withs, bind me with rope. And we weren't even close. He was just, but now he's starting to lean on him pretty hard. And y'all understand, I mean, again, I'm trying to let everyone just kind of read between the lines here. But she's leaning on him pretty hard. She's leaning on him pretty hard. She's pushing on him pretty hard. She's like, you've mocked me. You've told me lies. And again, I mean, not in my voice, but if you could hear a feminine voice say that to a man that it says that he loved. In verse number 4, it came to pass afterward that he loved a woman. And so he had built up this affection for Delilah. And yes, he was having fun. He was having a good time. But he built up this affection towards her. And all she had to do was start acting like maybe she's going to take that affection away if he doesn't start treating her a little different. And so now he's, like I said, he's gotten closer. He's ignored warning number 1 when she bound him. She's like, hey, what will it take? Green withs. So what does she do? She gets green withs, binds him. You lied to me. Okay, sorry I lied to you. It was ropes. And then she gets ropes. Again, none of this stuff, it's not like this stuff's laying around. Maybe it was just laying around. Maybe he looked around and said, well, green withs. Maybe he looked around and said a rope. Maybe he looked around and saw her thing to weave fabric or whatever. And that's what gave him the inspiration to say, oh, well, if you weave my hair. Maybe that's what it was, but I don't know. It almost appears to me, again, like I said, just like before when I said there was a 20-year span, I don't think this happened just bam, 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 bam. I don't think this happened. You'll even see it in the next thing that it didn't happen immediately. It was over days. She continued to lean on him. She continued to vex him. She continued to ask him and ask him and ask him and ask him and nag him. Until finally he's like, fine, I'll tell you. But here he is, but he's gotten a little closer, Silver. He's told her it was his hair. He just didn't tell her, my hair's never been cut. And I don't think she didn't realize, but again, like I said, here's God sending someone a warning. If someone says, hey, what could destroy you? And the thing that you say would destroy you is the thing they do immediately. That should be a pretty good hint. It's a pretty good clue. If you have your Bible right here, just leave it in Judges chapter 16 and turn over to the book of Proverbs. The book of Proverbs is very interesting if you think about, because if you think about it, it was written mostly written by Solomon. And when you think about it, and I think I heard someone say this the other day or this week, and actually it might have been the message my wife was listening to this morning from Brother Jones. But if you think about it, I mean, it was a woman that took out the strongest man in the Bible. It was a woman or women, in Solomon's case, that took down the wisest man in the Bible. It was the lust in his heart for a woman and what he did because of that lust that took out a man after God's own heart. And so, to me, that's 3 warnings, Gabe, that you better be careful. You better watch. And so Proverbs chapter number 2, verse number 16. Verse number 16. And again, like I said, I love the book of Proverbs. We used to read the book of Proverbs to our kids every night. We'd read a proverb, and I read a proverb a day for years, and loved the book of Proverbs. And it's a father trying to exhort his son, to listen to the, I'm going to say advice, listen to the instruction of your father. Listen to the words from your father, the words from your mother. And so he, many times, but I'll read several passages. We're going to read a bunch of scripture this morning, and forgive me, but it just, it just works. So in verse number 16, to deliver thee from the strange woman, even from the stranger which flattereth with her words. Now, a lot of times we look at it as the opposite. We look at it as the man as the pursuer. And for the most part, that's probably true, but it's not always true. It's not always true. Which forsaketh the guide of her youth. Now, I want you to think about this. When I read this passage right here, it says, "Which forsaketh the guide of her youth." I think about like, and I'm going to use it in modern day, but Silver, I think about this girl might have grew up in church. She grew up in a good family. She grew up in a good home. She grew up knowing what was right. It said, she forsaketh the guide of her youth and forgetteth the covenant of her God. Like I said, she grew up in church. She grew up knowing God. She grew up around the things of God. She grew up, and yet she made a conscious choice that I'm not going that way. And she said, I'm not going that way, I'm going this way. And I'm not just going this way, but I'm taking some people with me. I'm not just going by myself. I'm not going towards heaven anymore. I'm going towards hell, and I'm going to take people with me when I go. For her house inclineth unto death, and her paths unto the dead. None that go unto her return again, neither take they hold of the paths of life. I remember my father-in-law, we used to go up to the Whitfield County Jail. We're talking 20 plus years ago. We're talking maybe almost 30 years ago. We used to go to the Whitfield County Jail. And we would go up on Sunday afternoon. We have a little service, and I know Riley's been doing some of that now. And so, a bunch of the guys in the church are Rock of Ages. Chris is doing some of it. Chris, did you ever go with us? Were you there whenever we went to Whitfield County? Okay, so that tells you how long ago it's been. We used to go up to the Whitfield County Jail, and there was a guy in the jail that was very proud of the fact that he was a sinner. And he was a drug dealer, and he bragged to my father-in-law that he took a preacher's son and gave him his first hit of whatever. Again, I don't know what drug it was. But he bragged and said, that boy has never drawn a sober breath from that day to this. I'm like, that's pretty cold. Guy's a drug dealer. Guy doesn't care. Like, he's making, when he's not in jail, he's making lots of money. He's driving flashy cars and, living what, he considers to be the good life. And he doesn't care who he sells to, what they have to do to get the money to buy the drugs that he's selling them. He doesn't care about any of that stuff. And brags about the fact that he took a preacher's son, a good and respectable preacher in the community, and took his son and gave him his first hit of whatever kind of dope, and said he's never drawn another sober breath. And to me, when I read this passage right here, it says, none that go unto her return again. Brother Tyrone, again, like I said, some people recover. Solomon, David recovered. Samson, we'll see it in a second. I mean, did he recover? Sort of. Did he repent? Yes. Did he try and get right? Yes. Did God answer his prayer? Yes. But he answered a prayer that basically said, God, take me out with them. As a blind man, he said, I can't do anything, in his mind, I can't do anything else for you, God. And so let me take out these people that are mocking you. They're celebrating their God for taking me down. And let me take them out. Did he recover? And a lot of times you see, and I hate that it's this way, a lot of times you see someone that grew up in church and has been in church their whole life, and they get out of church, and they're hard to win back, Brother Tyrone. They're so hard to bring them back. They're so hard because they can't get over their failure. And again, like I said, the just man falls 7 times, riseth up again. You're going to have failures, but they don't get over it. And so she says none, or the Bible says none that go unto her return again, neither take they hold of the paths of life. And so here is Solomon. He's like, listen, I'm trying to warn you. They will take you down. If you get to chapter number 5, if you get to chapter number 5, it says, my son, attend unto my wisdom and bow down thine ear to my understanding, that thou mayest regard discretion, and that thy lips may keep knowledge. For the lips of a strange woman drop as a honeycomb, and her mouth is smoother than oil. He said, look, son, again, Solomon, I of all men understand what it is to appreciate a beautiful woman. I understand completely. Her lips are drop as a honeycomb, and her mouth is smoother than oil. He said, I understand it. But her end. Again, like I said, you think about advertising. You ride down the road and you look up and they're advertising alcohol, and they always show you a beautiful woman in a bikini on a beach. That's what they show you. They don't show you laying in your own vomit, and you don't remember where you are, or you don't know where you are, you don't know where you've been, you don't know how you got there. They don't show you none of that. They only show you that picture. And Solomon said, he said, I'm going to tell you what it looks like, but I'm going to tell you how it ends. But her end is bitter as wormwood, sharp as a two-edged sword. Her feet go down to death. Her steps take hold on hell. He said, oh, it's going to look so good. It's going to look so good. But if you can see behind the curtain, if you can see behind the door, if you can see where it ends, that's veneer. That's a false front. That's fake. It's just as soon as you get past, it's fake. Lest thou shouldest ponder the path of life, her ways are movable, thou canst not know them. Hear me now, therefore, O ye children, and depart not from the words of my mouth. Remove thy way far from her, and come not nigh the door of her house. You know what he said? He said, don't even play that game. Don't even play that game. Like I said, people think, I'm fine. I mentioned it last week, how sometimes it starts out so innocent. It starts out so innocent. There's a preacher we know that has been here. He sat right over there, and I remember him being here. I remember him hugging a man that had tried to get right with God at that time, and that man was sitting in a cafe somewhere and struck up a conversation with a waitress. And he came back and struck up another conversation with the same waitress. And he came back again, Matthew, and struck up another conversation with the waitress. And eventually that conversation led to paths it should not have been down. And eventually that conversation was no longer a conversation, but it was an agreement to meet somewhere that they should not have been meeting. That man was a married man. That man was a pastor. That man was a really good preacher. And like I said, if I mentioned his name, a bunch of y'all know him, and some of y'all probably know who I'm talking about. And that man did something he should not have done. And all the pieces just lost his church, lost his wife, his kids, lost all those things for just a moment of pleasure. And that's just one story. There's so many of those stories of someone at work and they're like, hey, you know, me and my husband are having problems. They start telling you their problems. You're not a counselor. You're not a counselor. That's not who you are. And yes, you got to have compassion, but you need to understand, like she's transferring more than just her problems to you. She's now looking to you, and you're about to take the place of her husband. In her mind, you're taking the place because you're going to help her with her problems, and before long, y'all have developed a relationship that's not just coworker, it's more. And then, again, like I said, I'm trying to, trying not to paint too much here, but you understand what I'm saying. It's so easy. You and your wife are having a problem, and you go down to the Waffle House. I said it the other day. You go down to the Waffle House, and they like, hey, honey. And by the way, we got a dog called Honey now. So now, anytime my wife says, "Hey, honey, can you come here?" I think she's talking to the dog. So I just keep doing what I'm doing. It's a perfect name for a dog. I'm really happy that the dog's name's Honey. But you understand what I'm saying? You go down to Waffle House or something like that, and they're like, "Hey, honey," and most of the time you're like, she calls everyone honey. Well, then you go down there one too many times, Matthew, and she's like, "Hey, honey." Whoa. What's she mean by honey? And you're like, "Come here, sweetie." And for long, y'all are having a conversation. "Hey, I'm not real happy with my wife. Yeah, she does this. I'm not real happy with my husband. And he's this and he's that." And for long, y'all have built a relationship. And it's a long, again, most of the time, the committing adultery, committing fornication, it doesn't happen immediately. You work your way up to it. And I believe that God sends you warning after warning of, hey, you better get out of here. You better get out of here. You better not go here. You better stop talking here. You better stop talking to this person. Like sirens and alarms going off inside your heart, inside your head. And the longer you ignore them, the closer you get. He said, "Remove thy way far from her, and come not nigh the door of her house." Boys, once you've crossed the door of the house, you're in trouble. "Lest thou give thine honor unto others, and thy years unto the cruel." Again, like I said, in the context of Samson, again, I'm sure that Samson wishes that Solomon had come before him and he could have read and listened to and heard the words of Solomon and said, "Man, I wish I'd have listened to that. I wish someone would have preached to me that. I wish someone would have told me that. I wish someone would have warned me about that." Lest thou give thine honor unto others, and thy years unto the cruel. Lest strangers be filled with thy wealth, and thy labors be in the house of a stranger. And thou mourn at the last when thy flesh and thy body are consumed. I will say also, again, we're talking about adultery, but I would almost guarantee that anyone that's ever been hooked on alcohol or hooked on drugs can say that right there is so true. All those words are so true. Strangers are filled with thy wealth. Thy labors are in the house of a stranger, and you mourn at the last when thy flesh and thy body are consumed. Bub talks about a guy. I guess he used to be a police officer, and he was real strong, and now he's just a drunk. And he's just a drunk. And he just works. He works all week to get drunk on, probably every night, and especially on the weekend. And someone sees him, they're like, "Hey, I remember what he used to be." Well, he's a used to be now because he got hooked on something. He's a used to be now because he got hooked on something and never could come back off of it. He says, "And thou mourn at the last when thy flesh and thy body are consumed, and say, how have I hated instruction, and my heart despised reproof." There'll be someone, whether it's a pastor, whether it's a Sunday school teacher, whether it's a friend, whether it's your father, whether it's your mother, there's going to be someone that said, "Hey, I don't like the road you're going down, and if you don't get off of it, you're going to wish you had." And if you're honest, you'll say, "I should have listened to you." I told you I'm a story about the guy that I worked with. He doesn't work for us anymore. And he was a very interesting boss. He was a service manager for a little while. And me and him, we would go out of town and work on jobs. And me and him, we would just go at it about stuff. I'm like, "This is not going to work. Let's not do it this way." But he was the boss, Gabe. And so at the end of the day, it was his call. And he said, "This is how we're doing it." All right, that's how we're going to do it. And then sometimes weeks, sometimes months later, Dakota, we went to Louisville, Kentucky one time, and we had to sit down in a meeting, and they're like, "This is a problem, that's a problem, this is a problem." Me and him walked outside because we didn't say it in front of them. I'm like, "You remember when I told you them 2 tanks that were there that I said, hey, we should leave them, and you said, no, we're taking them out, and you refused to leave them because you said I already quoted taking them out?" "Yeah." I'm like, "They need them 2 tanks. He's like, "Yeah, I know it." And he was always good, Brother Dakota. He was always good to say, "Yeah, you know what, you were right." But he never was good on the front end of saying, "Hey, you know what, I'm going to take your advice and we're going to do it your way." We always did it his way, and it almost always turned out wrong. But here's this, he said, "How have I hated instruction, and my heart despised reproof, and have not obeyed the voice of my teachers, nor inclined mine ear to them that instructed me." You walk out of this Sunday school class and go mess up with a woman, you'll have to come back and say, "You tried to tell me. You tried to tell me. You tried to warn me. You attempted to warn me." But just like Samson, I would not listen. I'm going to have to hurry. I'm running out of time. In verse 22 and 23, it says, "His own iniquity shall take the wicked himself, and he shall be holden with the cords of his sins. He shall die without instruction, and in the greatness of his folly he shall go away." I don't have time to read Proverbs chapter number 7. I don't have time to read it. I'll read just a few verses. Verse number 5. "That they may keep thee from the strange woman, from the stranger which flattereth with her words." Verse number 10. "And behold, there met him a woman with an attire of a harlot, and subtle of heart." Verse number 21, "Which with her much fair speech she caused him to yield. With the flattering of her lips she forced him. He goeth after her straightway, as an ox goeth to the slaughter, or as a fool to the correction stocks. Till a dart strike through his liver, as a bird hasteth to the snare, and knoweth not that it is for his life. Hearken unto me now, therefore, O ye children, and attend to the words of my mouth. Let not thine heart decline to her ways. Go not astray in her path, for she hath cast down many wounded." You think you're the first? No, you're just one of many. "For she hath cast down many wounded, yea, many strong men have been slain by her house. Her house is the way to hell, going down to the chambers of death." Solomon warned his son, he said, "You better be careful. it took Samson down. The lust for a woman took my father down. And because of women, I did things against God that I should not have done. And yet here we get back to the book of Judges. Verse number 16, because I got to hurry. It says, "And it came to pass when she pressed him daily with her words and urged him so that his soul was vexed unto death." I'm just going to say, he wasn't married to her. Brother Dakota, again, I know it says he loved the woman. He wasn't married to her, Silver. Sometimes you're like, you know what? You're not the one for me. That's all we need to say. You're not the one for me. But he couldn't. And when Delilah, then he told her all his heart and said unto her, "There hath not come a razor upon mine head, for I have been a Nazarite unto God from my mother's womb. If I be shaven, then my strength will go from me, and I shall become weak like any other man." And when Delilah saw that he told her all his heart, she called for the lords of the Philistines, saying, "Come up this once, for he showed me all his heart." Then the lords of the Philistines came up unto her and brought money in their hand. So again, like I said, Samson tells her his heart. She has to go tell the lords of the Philistines, "Come up, I got him." So if you don't remember anything from this morning Sunday school class, just remember this one thing: don't ever tell a woman all your heart. That was a joke. It was a joke. Anyway, and so he comes up, and he tells her all his heart, and she goes and she gets the lords of the Philistines, and she says, "Come on up," and they pay the money, and she said, "All right, I'm gonna put him to sleep. He loves to just lay down in my lap, and he loves for me to just caress on his head until he goes to sleep. And as soon as he goes to sleep, come up with the shears and chop off his hair." And so Samson, not realizing that this is the time that God said, "It's on you. It's on you. It's not on me. I tried to warn you. I tried to stop you. I tried to get you not to do this. I showed you who she was, or she showed you who she was, and you wouldn't listen." And so she puts him to sleep. They come up and look in verse number 21. They cut his hair, and he gets up. And again, one of the saddest things in the Bible is verse 20 says, "And he wist not that the Lord had departed from him." Again, one of the saddest verses in all the Bible is here is a man that God, from his youth, that God had touched and God had used, and God had used mightily, and God had done great things for him and through him. And I didn't mention this, but how he answered his prayer. He answered his prayer before this, after he slew the 1,000 men, and he's like, "I'm going to die of thirst," and God gave him something to drink. And yet, here he is. Here's a man that's had all that done in his life, but because of a woman, now he's reduced to verse number 21. "But the Philistines took him and put out his eyes." And again, like I said, I can picture it in my mind. Here's Samson, and 1,000 men couldn't stop him. But at that moment, the scrawniest, the smallest, the weakest Philistine walked up to him and said, "Got you." And somebody had a stick or something, a sword or something that they heated up, and they said, "Hold him still." And he had no power. Again, you think about it. Some people, you can take sometimes the smallest people, and they're just wildcats. It takes 3, 4, 5 men to hold them down. Sometimes a police officer trying to arrest somebody, and that's why they got tasers and stuff now. But sometimes it's 3, 4, 5 policemen trying to hold him down. 1,000 men couldn't have held Samson down before he got his hair cut, but now the smallest guy held him down, and they held his head still, and he had to stand there and watch as they stuck that thing, and they stuck it right in his eye. and felt and smelled. You know how flesh smells when it burns? And they burned out one eye. And then they said, hold still, Samson, and he couldn't do anything about it. And they burned out a second eye. And Samson had to say in his heart, what in the world have I just done? What did I let this woman do? She told me what she was going to do. She asked me over and over and over, and every time she asked me, she did exactly what I told her. She warned me. There could have been no bigger warning signs. And I ignored every one of them and said, no. So they take out his eyes, and I'm out of time, but they take out his eyes, and we understand in verse number 22, it says, howbeit the hair of his head began to grow again after he was shaven. Now what happens here in the next verses, and like I said, I'm going to hurry, is that they decide to have a party and celebrate the fact that their God had delivered Samson into their hands. It wasn't their God at all. It was the lust of Samson's heart. It was the fact that he ignored a warning. That was what delivered Samson into their hands. Their God didn't have a thing to do about it. It was the wickedness of Samson's heart and the lust for a woman that did it. And so they have this big party, and they're praising their God, and they're celebrating, and here's Samson grinding in this prison house, but yet his hair's starting to grow, and he's gotten right with God. But he's gotten right with God, but he's like, I don't have any eyes anymore. I can't see. I can't see. I'm never going to be what I was before. And all those things were true. And so it says, it came to pass when the hearts were merry that they said, call for Samson that he may make us sport. And they said, bring Samson out. Let's have again, they're obviously drunk because their hearts were merry, and they're celebrating their God, and they're worshiping their God, and they're like, bring Samson out so that we can celebrate some more. And Samson said unto the lad that held him by the hand, suffer me that I may feel the pillars whereupon the house standeth, that I may lean upon them. And again, if you get the picture, here are these two main pillars, and everything else that's built up is on that. And if you've ever seen a building destroyed, they don't have to take the whole building down. Sometimes they just have to take just a few things, and the building just comes down. And somewhere, Brother Dakota, I thought this, somewhere Samson had been in that building or seen that building. And he had to ask that boy, where am I at? And he said, this is where. Him and Delilah may have been on a date down there. And watched him make sport with someone else. I don't know. But he knew that building, he knew them pillars, and he said, just get me over there. Just get me over there where I can stick my hands between them two pillars. And he got down there and stuck his hands between them two pillars. And again, this is just me thinking, I really hope he told the boy, hey, why don't you run outside and go get me something. I hope he did. The Bible doesn't say, and I'm just speculating, but I hope he did. I hope he told that boy, thank you for doing that. Will you run outside and get something for me? Samson, in verse number 28, and Samson called unto the Lord and said, O Lord God, remember me. One of the, again, this is just a sad, sad chapter. Here's a man that was a judge for 20 years. Here's a man that did mighty works in Israel. Here's a man that ended up in the great faith chapter of Hebrews chapter number 11. But here's a man reduced to nothing but asking God, remember me. Remember me, I pray thee, and strengthen me, I pray thee, only this once. God, I don't have lots of prayers left in me. I only have one. O God, that I may be at once avenged of the Philistines for my two eyes. And Samson took hold of the two middle pillars upon which the house stood, and on which it was borne up, of the one with his right hand and the other with his left. And Samson said, let me die with the Philistines. And he bowed himself with all his might, and the house fell upon the lords, upon all the people that were therein. So the dead which he slew with his death were more than they which he slew in his life. Verse number 31, it says, then his brethren, the ones he wouldn't listen to from the start. Remember his mom and dad, and again, I understand, we talked about it, that first marriage was from God to create a division, but, but from that moment on, it wasn't. Then his brethren and his father's house came down and took him and brought him up and buried him between Zorah and Eshtaol in the barren place of Manoah his father, and he judged Israel 20 years. They couldn't do nothing with him. You remember, some of them also tried to sell him out. And here's their champion, Samson. That man, I'm sure, you know how it is. Every funeral, someone comes by and they tell stories. Oh, I remember when he did this. Oh, I remember when he did that. And Silver, he wasn't that old. But he was already finished because he let a woman. Because he let a woman entice him to give up his great strength. Thank you.